Hello and welcome to the Open Minds podcast, the podcast that interviews amazing and unique individuals from around the world who personify having an open mind, who are doing their bit in the world to make this world a better place. My name's Paul and I'm your host. I'm also the Managing Director and founder at the Open Mind Institute here in Brisbane, Australia. My very special guest today derives from Melbourne, Australia, and please allow me to introduce him. So, although he's an educator, a teacher, a youth worker, I would best describe him as a true global citizen. He has traveled to some 113 countries. Indeed, is one of the most well-traveled person I know. But on top of that, his energy, his authenticity is infectious. He has volunteered with remote Indigenous communities, as well as volunteering in Palestine and Feed the Homeless in the UK. He's worked in education, community programs, and youth work for NGOs and government organisations alike. And in addition to his Bachelor of Arts in Education, he's recently enrolled in completing his Masters of Social Work. Please allow me to introduce Jakob van der Wiel. Jakob, welcome to Open Minds.
Thank you, Paul. It's lovely to be here.
It's lovely to have you on board. I know it's been some time organising, and I'm glad we finally made it. So, just for the benefit of the listeners, you and I have known each other for some time.
We have.
I had a bit of a think before today, Jake, and I think it's at least 15 years. And my first memory, I believe the first time we met, was in the early hours of the morning. It was an after party in inner city Melbourne, Clifton Hill.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, instantaneously, I had a bit of a bromance moment with you, because despite our high levels of intoxication, you were incredibly sharp and humorous, and the wit was next level, and we stayed up till the sun rose talking. And
we certainly did.
A long time ago now. We've stayed friends, and although we've travelled in different friendship circles, we've had adventures together, been to music festivals together, and I had the pleasure of seeing you again after many years. You were here in Brisbane recently. So again, mate, it's been a journey, but an absolute pleasure to finally have you on board.
Thank you, Paul. And I know it's been a long time coming, and it's a real pleasure to see you too.
All right, so let's get into it, Jake. I'm itching to ask you about your travels. As I said, I know a lot of people, and you've been the one who traveled the most that I know of. But before we get to that, I really want to start at the grassroots level, because I know you have a very rich family history and tapestry. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, and tell us, what it was like for you growing up in Melbourne.
Yeah, definitely. So both of my parents are migrants. Mum's a migrant from Italy and Dad from the Netherlands. Dad's actually a refugee who fled World War II with his family. My grandmother on my Dutch side was Jewish, so they escaped from persecution in occupied Netherlands during World War II. And they both came to Melbourne on boats, so both boat people. And Dad grew up in Geelong for quite a while before coming to Melbourne on a scholarship to Melbourne Uni, and Mum grew up in the western suburbs and then went to Monash on a scholarship for law as well. And they both studied to become lawyers. They've both worked in quite different spheres of the law, but definitely growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, my nonna, on my Italian side, and running around the garden as a little kid and feeding the chickens. And as you very well know, coming from Greek Australian diaspora, there's a lot of similarities in, the respecting the elders and spending a lot of time with multi-generations in the same household, which I think is a really, really beautiful thing, and a sort of a trait that's been carried on through a lot of Mediterranean families in Australia, and many other families by that matter, from many different cultures. And then, I grew up in Clifton Hill in Melbourne with my parents. Went to a local primary school, which was wonderfully diverse and really a rich experience. And then, attended high school in Melbourne, Went to two different high schools, met some wonderful people at both, and afforded me a lot of opportunities to then go on and study education, study arts, and kind of use those to bolster my travels to explore the world. I at a very young age, mum and dad also took me on a few trips that they did. A few of them would leave me at home with Nonna, which was also quite nice. And yeah, very, very, very young, I was already being taken to a lot of different countries quite far away. And being an only child, kind of usually on my own in those countries. Mum and dad would sometimes be a bit busy, so I'd meet a lot of locals, meet a lot of local kids when I was very young, and just from a very young age, learned to appreciate kind of, that we're kind of all the same all over the world. We've got a lot of differences, but a little kid in Egypt and a little kid in Australia, both want to hang out and play and have fun and annoy their parents and explore and play games and same the world over. So
yeah. So true. So you were exposed to many, many cultures from a young age. You were traveling ever since you were a young fella. So speak to me a little bit about your teenage years. Like who were your role models?
Yeah, so definitely Dad's always been someone that's been very strong in my life, but the women in my life have always been particularly strong. I mean, my mum is truly an inspiration. She's, moved out of home when she was 16, 17 years old to go to Monash on her own. She explored the world herself, worked as a lawyer for many years, now doing a PhD at age, in her mid-60s. And my nonna was always huge in my upbringing, a wonderful guidance, taught me a lot about the world, a lot about botany and nature and, the respect for different elders and generations and also diversity and learning from people from different cultures very young. So I think definitely it was my parents, my uncle, who I'm very close with too, and my nonna was a huge inspiration on me growing up. She's definitely my hero, I think.
Right.
Well, she was, yeah.
That's amazing, mate. And when did you get the itch to travel on this massive escapade that you embarked upon? I mean, I did a bit of research. I think today we have 195 countries in this world.
Yep.
You've traveled to 113 of them.
Yeah.
When did that itch start for you to embark on that massive journey that you took a number of years ago?
So I think growing
up,
so growing up, there was definitely, going back to visit mum's family in Italy and visiting dad's family abroad as well was impressioned upon me. But I finished high school in 2005 and then did the typical, went and did a trip to Thailand with my friends, and that was quite nice, and came home. And at the time I was working in bars in Melbourne. I worked in Cherry Bar, which was great back in its heyday in ACDC Lane. Anyone who's been to Melbourne or knows Melbourne, that's a very iconic old venue. And, I was being a bit of a little bar fly doing my thing at 18. And before I was enrolled to go to uni, and then I actually, an opportunity arose for several friends that I went to high school with, and then several very close friends that I'd grown up with that didn't go to the same high school. We all decided we wanted to go to India together when we were 19, 20 years old. Right. And we all went, and we went for 6 months, which was incredible. And that, I think, was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences for a teenager at that time, to go off and, just with our backpacks, riding the public trains all around India, no ultimate budget trip, everything, sleeping on floors. We slept in half-built houses in Goa, and we went all the way down to the south of the country, all the way up to the north.
Wow.
Saw the Himalayas. That was really, really beautiful. But one of the biggest breakthroughs, I think, came when I was in my second year, I believe, of my education and arts degree. I was doing a double. Yeah. And a lecturer approached me. I was doing quite well academically at the time, and said, you know that there's study abroad opportunities available, and that there's scholarship opportunities available for tertiary students to go and live and study abroad in a foreign country. So I kind of didn't think anything of it. I was, as a second year uni student at the time, partying quite a bit and having fun, and, thought, I'll throw my hat in the ring. Why not? It never hurts. And I went through a series of interviews with a panel at La Trobe Uni, and they looked at our academic results. They looked at our potential to be an ambassador for La Trobe University and for Australia abroad.
Yeah.
And yeah, I went to one of the interviews, and there was a fascinating plethora of academics from different universities around the world and those representing those. And they said to me, so your preferences are that you want to go to Mexico, Sweden, and then possibly to the US. I said, yeah. And they said, well, if you were to change your preferences possibly to Sweden, we think you'd be a little bit more successful. I said, okay, all right. Well then, yeah, I'll chuck them around. I've never thought of Scandinavia as much. And I left thinking, oh, well, there's 200 or 300 people who've applied for these scholarships. They're giving 2 or 3 away. I'm probably not going to get it. And I was driving back home from La Trobe in Bundoora in my old car, the old bomb, and I got a phone call from the uni, and I pulled over to the side of the road and answered the phone, and there was one of the ladies from the panel who said to me, I just wanted to ring and let you know we're very happy that you're actually been successful and you're going to Sweden. And that was hands down, I think, one of the biggest changing and, pivotal moments in my sort of enthusiasm to explore the world, because that then went on to, I went to Scandinavia. I went to live in Sweden, just went on my own. I knew absolutely no one, south of Sweden.
Another language.
Not another language. I mean, the Swedes' English is incredible, but when I got there, I thought, oh, maybe there'll be a few other international students. And Malmö University in the south of Sweden, where it was at the time, was really pitching itself as an international university and was attracting a lot of students from around the world. So when I got there, I realized we were, our student cohort of internationals was more than 100 different nationalities represented. The classes were spectacular. I had, students who are all studying to be teachers in their own countries, all coming together in one classroom, where sometimes you'd have 30, 40, 50 different nationalities all in the same class, all bringing their own cultural perspectives to what they thought it was to be a teacher, what education meant, bringing their own sort of, their cultures to it, but also their own flair. And that was fascinating. And from there, kind of the Pandora's box opened, so to speak. And, I did a student trip to Russia that was, as you could probably expect, all undergraduate kids, wild. Did a few little trips to other parts of Europe. And then, I lived in Sweden for almost a year. And that then opened me up to I ended up moving to Berlin, and, the kind of the travel all really began.
And when did you get that idea, I'm going to travel to as many countries as I humanly possibly can? Or was it this organic thing you just sort of...
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it grew quite organically. So, at the beginning, when I was a kid, I was traveling quite a bit. And then, as a teenage, I went on a few trips and absolutely adored it. But then, I think through realizing, wow, there's just so much out there to see, and there's so much to learn from traveling, and so much to gain from understanding other people's cultures and perspectives and upbringings and food, religions, diversity of landscapes. I think I got to a point where I thought, oh, well, I should probably just start counting where I'm going rather than just looking here and there. And then, I kind of fell in love. I think it was in my mid-20s later that I really got to the stage where I was kind of driven to try and get to 100 countries before I turned 30.
Right. Okay.
And I hit that. I think I saw 102, 103 by the time I was 30. And I don't think it's about, I will sort of reiterate, it's not about how many you go to see. I don't think there's anything about that, the counting and all that. I know people who've been to every country in the world, but, some of them have spent 5 minutes in, visiting a capital, leave the airport, have a look, up on you go. And I think it's not so much how much you see in terms of quantity. It's more like the quality of what you're getting out of what you're doing. I think there's people I've met in really remote, very hard to visit nations who haven't traveled that widely, but you can see by the way they interact with people and the way they interact with the local culture and their kind of vivacity and, enthusiasm for life that they bring to meeting new people and those experiences that really count. Yeah.
It's about immersing yourself, right?
Yeah.
Entrenching yourself in that culture, and you're quite right. A lot of people travel and they just follow that tourist trail, and but you really seem to just immerse yourself with the people. I wondering, Jake, if you could tell us about some of these countries who aren't on everyone's list. You've been to some very unique places like North Korea,
Yeah.
some places that have been challenging to and I'd imagine a little bit scary to travel through. So maybe take us through some of those destinations where you did feel a little bit uncertain and unwary.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been to some quite unique countries that haven't been. I mean, every country's unique, but some less touristed countries that have been quite interesting. In 2015, I took a trip where I started in China and went to North Korea. I spent a month traveling around North Korea on a guided tour provided by the North Korean government, which is kind of the way that everyone visits North Korea. So it's all very structured, but it's also it was fascinating. I think some people visit North Korea for a couple of days. After a month, you have a government assigned tour guide. You kind of go where they want you to go. You see what they want you to see. But after a month, there was quite a few cracks that kind of would appear, and we'd start seeing things that weren't really meant to be on kind of like the Truman Show-esque visit of North Korea that most experience. And as part of that trip in 2015, I ended up going from North Korea all the way back to London and living in Bristol for some time, and basically kind of seeing almost everything in between in Asia and in the Middle East. We spent a month during that trip in Iran. Iran is hands down one of my favorite countries to visit in the world. There were people absolutely spectacularly friendly. They have a culture, something called taruf, which is almost like hospitality on steroids. It's like chivalry and being a warm, hospitable host, like on another level than I've ever seen before. A great example was, a friend and I that I met traveling in Iran, we went to see a soccer game between Tehran and Esfahan, which are two cities in Iran, and there's a big football rivalry between the two. And we went to this stadium where at the time women weren't actually, now they are, but women weren't allowed to visit the stadiums in Iran, and there was religious police sort of stationed around the stadium. There's obviously no alcohol. And even the celebrations, they try and keep them a little bit under wraps just because it's all in line with, the government's sort of stance on those things. And as my friend and I entered this stadium, we met some Iranian guys Persians who were really, really lovely and friendly, and had showed us around and took us to the stadium with them. And as we went in, a few people asked them, what are these guys doing here? What are they? We were the only foreigners in this huge football stadium. And the Iranians told them, these guys are from Australia, they're from England, they've come to visit Iran, and they love it here. It's a beautiful country. And the whole football stadium erupted into singing to us, "Welcome to Iran." And there was like,
what a moment,
people all singing in English and Farsi, "Welcome to Iran, welcome to me." And I thought that was an example of, before I went to Iran, a lot of people would say, be careful in that region of the world. I think there's a lot of negative media that's generated about Iran. And for sure, there's difficulties faced by Persians living in Iran. But I think, people would say you should be wary and very concerned about your time there. And if anything, it was the opposite. I think, I had nothing but warm experiences. And one of the most ironic things of going there was a friend in the US had said to me prior to going there, be careful of terrorism when you go to Iran. I said, okay, yeah. Because obviously the US media giant manufactures these wonderful things about Iran, and there's a lot of fear and stuff. Yeah. And I was on a bus across the country. I had a beard that was much bigger than it is now. And in the middle of the night, the bus stopped, and some police got on the bus and asked me to come off the bus. Right. And I was chatting with the police, and, they were very warm, very courteous. And I was a bit perplexed. I said, look, I'm just wondering why have I been taken off the bus, and why have I been singled out? And they said, you've got quite a big beard. We were just a bit worried that you might be a terrorist and you're part of ISIS. And I thought, this is amazing that, the irony of people saying, be careful where you're going and what you're doing there. And it's actually, the world over, everyone has preconceived ideas of who people are and what to expect of them. But But that was beautiful. And, you know, some of the experiences I had in Africa were magnificent. I went to Eritrea, which is one of the least visited parts of Africa, and was there for their national holiday. I was on Eritrean national television, being one of their only, you know, networks that they have, being interviewed about my experiences as a tourist in Eritrea. And then that was broadcast across the whole country. So as I traveled through Eritrea, I'd regularly go to a restaurant and someone would be staring at me kind of weird and come over and say, "Were you on TV last week?" And I said, "Yeah, yes."
You became a bit of a celeb, and I
was quite nice.
Following your travels on social, and you were also in a movie, correct? Was it in?
Yeah. So in Uganda, a friend and I from Ireland went to visit, and I had a friend living in Uganda at the time, which kind of reinforces that concept of it's always great to just stay in touch with people, remain connected around the world, and, you know, always value each interaction you have. And a friend that I'd met long ago on another travel, I think somewhere in Asia, was living in Uganda, and my friend John and I visited Uganda together, and we were chatting with my mate who lived there. He had a partner who was Ugandan, and he said, "Hey, there's these guys who are making this incredible cinema from like almost a bit of a shanty town on the outskirts of Kampala, which is the capital." We said, "Oh yeah, we could be interested in that. That'd be interesting. Maybe we'll go and check that out." And I didn't realize at the time, but Vice magazine had been there and made a big documentary about these guys, and there was a few other things that were online, you know, in different media. Yeah. And we went there, and it was kind of like love at first sight. We met this wonderful director called Isaac, who has a huge film school for youth in Uganda, and he's like pioneering Ugandan action cinema. It's called Wakali Wood, Wakali Wood, like Hollywood with Wakali. Yeah. And they make all their own props there. They weld them. They make like Gatling guns. They built a helicopter that doesn't fly, but they use for special effects. They make hardcore like action cinema where they're influenced a lot by things like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, those kind of things. And yeah, we were in one of their films. So, you know, I was in one of the films with a bit of a baddie, and, you know, I had to shoot people up. And there's kids from all the community there. You know, everyone's living in like kind of tin sheds. It's very much, you know, on the outskirts of the city, and they're truly inspirational people. I mean, they're now becoming quite famous. There's a documentary about them called Once Upon a Time in Uganda that you can find online. Yeah. And yeah, I recommend anyone who goes to Uganda to go and visit Wakali Wood. They're magnificent people and super, super interesting. And that was quite special as well. But yeah, those travels to quite remote places. We went to Somalia, Somaliland during that trip, northern Somalia. I went to Turkmenistan, which is, I think, one of the least visited countries in the world. It's a part of Central Asia. Part of the former Soviet Union. I travelled independently through the whole of the former Soviet Union, every state that used to make up the USSR, and rented a car in Kyrgyzstan and drove it through Tajikistan with some friends that I just met at a backpackers, and we ended up driving into Afghanistan. I visited some amazing villages in northern Afghanistan and met one particularly inspirational individual who runs a school in Afghanistan in the north, who still remain there now despite the Taliban taking control again. And I've been with some friends helping to provide some financial support to him. I can perhaps give you details later if anyone's interested in that kind of thing. That'd be a great avenue to donate to. He's got a school where he, you know, educates young people, and really inspirational person. And that was beautiful, you know, and everywhere we went, just welcomed with open arms. Had some wonderful experiences. And yeah, of course, I've had some dicey experiences around the world too. So there's always been a bit of both.
I can imagine. A very difficult question for you. Favorite destinations? You mentioned.
Iran.
Yeah.
Iran's up there. I think Taiwan is an incredible destination. Very underrated for tourism. Amazing food, incredible infrastructure, not anywhere near as much tourism as you'd think, and beautiful, diverse country with, you know, huge gorge in the middle called Taroko. The East Coast is full of Taiwanese Indigenous culture. A lot of people don't know, but Taiwan has quite a large Aboriginal Taiwanese population. great surfing on the coast, amazing night markets. You know it's an amazing country for food when you meet tours of Japanese and mainland Chinese people who, when you ask them, what are you guys doing here? They said, oh, we're just here for the food. We're on foodie tours. So Taiwan's a pretty special place. You know, there's many. I think Germany will always have a special place in my heart. I lived there for many years. That's a stunning country. Berlin is one of the most unique cities in the world. South America is amazing. Argentina's always kind of stolen my heart. And then, you know, Central America itself, from all the way from Panama up the north, up the guts to, you know, Guatemala and Mexican border in that area. That's fascinating. I spent about 6 months backpacking, where I spent the majority of the time hitchhiking. We went from Colombia, we sailed through the San Blas Islands to Panama, and then myself and 2 friends from Argentina who were inspirational women who I still keep in touch with to this day. We hitchhiked from Panama through Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, back up to Mexico together. And there was some hair-raising experiences there, as you can imagine. Beautiful
experience. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I mean, you've been to so many places, Jake. Tell us about your observation and your insights in relation to, I guess, you know, how would you look at this connection that we all have, irrespective of where we come from? You know, how would you, do you have any insights on, you know, us as a species, despite where we come from? Were there any commonalities that really became apparent after you started traveling to all these countries?
I definitely think so. I think we're all, like, I think everyone wants to be loved. I think all human beings want connection to others, or most do. And we all want a sense of community, and what that means in different cultures or different places might be slightly different, but in the end, we all want to remain connected to others and be close to others. We all want to love and be loved by our family, by friends, by you know, partners, and I think we want to take care of people too. A really beautiful observation that's kind of come away from all over the world. And, you know, I lived in Republic of Georgia, I lived in England, I lived in Germany, I lived in Sweden, I lived in Australia, and then all the way through all the travels is I've kind of found that, you know, if you approach people with warmth, if you approach people with an open mind, if you approach people with respect and a mutual sense of appreciation of the fact that you are in another person's culture as a guest, you're there often because you can afford to be there, you know, and you're there because you want to explore and understand. You'll most often than not, I'd say 99% of the time, be met with warmth and friendship and generosity. And I think, you know, the age-old, you know, expression of sometimes those with the least give the most, I think is very, very true. Some of the most generous, warm, hospitable people I've met anywhere on earth have sometimes been people with maybe not that much accumulated financially or assets or things like that, but might be very rich in family or in culture or in community, and sometimes be willing to give the most. And I think that's something that we can really take away to any sort of society you're living in the world, is that, you know, if you do have an open mind, if you do approach people with wanting to understand and not being steadfast in your preconceptions, I think that's when really, like, learning occurs. And I think that's a commonality I've seen around the world, is, you know, sort of warmth begets warmth, and open-mindedness begets open-mindedness.
Yeah. Very well said.
I hope that's answered the question. It doesn't digress too much.
No, it certainly has, you know, and it's something I really resonate with. I think something I take away from that is that it does boil down to that human connection set piece. As you said, we all want to be loved. We all want to be felt as part of a community, right? And what you've described to me there, Jake, is also something called unconditional positive regard, right? So, which was developed by, well, it was popularized by an American psychologist by the name of Carl Rogers.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I'm aware of it. Yep.
And what he says is that, you know, if you genuinely are communicating with someone and you are demonstrating acceptance and empathy, irrespective of their behavior or their background, or some of the bad things they've done, then you're actually providing that psychological safety, right? Because you're respecting them, as you said, as a human being. And the fact that, even if they have gone off the rails before, you're not judging them. You're actually appreciating them as a human, and they've got the mental faculties to, to grow, to learn, and the best way I can describe unconditional positive regard is looking at the opposite of it, right? Which is conditional positive regard, and that is, I will only love you, I will only support you, I will only accept you on the condition that you behave a certain way.
Yep.
Right. And you can see how it's polar opposite, which is what you really exemplify, can have such a profound impact on people. And as you say, it really struck a chord with me, because I experienced that in my travels as well. Some of the most humble and giving people are those who don't have anything. But if they are receptive to the fact, because I think they're so authentic, they've been through a lot themselves, and when they can tell that someone is before them with that open heart and open mind, they'll give you the shirt off their back.
Yep. That's very, very true. Yeah.
So very, very, very powerful stuff, mate. Tell us a little bit about your volunteer experience with Indigenous communities here in Australia.
Yeah, so in 2015, I've been working in education with local government. I've been working a little bit with NGOs and done a lot of different things within the education sphere. And I stumbled across this magnificent organisation which still exists today, and I would highly, highly recommend young people to check it out, get in touch with them, especially those in Western Australia. But there's chapters of it around Australia, called Fair Game Australia.
Fair Game, I've heard of Fair Game.
FAIRGAME. It started by sort of an absolutely inspirational individual called John Van Boxmeer, who was the CEO at the time, who I believe was in the running for Young Australian of the Year, and he's a doctor who was working in Western Australia, all around in Port Hedland, all over the place. And this opportunity kind of arose to go and volunteer with the organisation. So what they do is they donate recycled sporting equipment to remote communities around Western Australia. They operate in the Pilbara region, the Gibb River Road, Fitzroy Crossing, Wheat Belt, and all around WA. Now they're in New South Wales as well. I believe they're in NT2. They're looking at Victoria as well. And I spent quite a significant portion of 2015 working with them, flying up to WA, driving 10 plus hours inland from the coast to areas like the Punmu community, which is a fascinating remote community near the borders of Western Australia. It's in the Pilbara region near the Telfer gold mine. And we worked with young people in that community. So did a lot of health and wellbeing projects, different sporting projects. There was a football carnival on at the time, and seeing the kids play on the red dirt, and it's a red dirt that I don't know. I mean, you might know, and anyone listening who's been up to see the red desert and remote WA regions, it's a red like kind of nothing else, and the sand gets into everything. The dust, anything white turns red overnight. And that was beautiful. That was eye opening. We met some really inspirational kids in those communities, a lot of young leaders coming through, especially a lot of very intelligent young women in community, which I think is something that we're starting to recognise better and better with time. And we've got a long way to go, but we're on the right track. And that was beautiful. I spent a bit of time in Punmu community. I went down to the Kimberley region, the Gibb River Road. We ran some sporting programs, met kids in local community. Got to chat a lot about health and well-being. And that was truly eye-opening, because despite the fact that I, by that stage, travelled to 80 plus countries in the world, sometimes it's fascinating what's in your own backyard. And, growing up in Melbourne, and a lot of us in Australia, I think, growing up in cities, we know so little about remote communities, and we know so little about our First Nations people in Australia. And that was, I don't afford to know a huge amount about it, but it certainly helped grow more understanding. And, things like that, I think, for young professionals, for young people who would really like to get out there, especially teachers, nurses, youth workers, doctors, people like that, I think there's a lot to contribute to our world through doing that. And there's also a lot to learn. You know, I was given a huge amount by those communities to learn about, you know, be afforded entry into some very unique places, taking to watering holes in the middle of, you know, oasis in the desert, some really fascinating things, man, you know, swimming with crocs near us and stuff, and playing basketball with the kids. The footy tournaments are wild up there too. So it was very special. It was really special.
I can imagine. But you raise a very good point, and I think that and that is that modern Australia, or mainstream Australia rather, knows very little about, you know, the First Nations people, and there is such a profound sacred wisdom that they have to impart, right? And so many nations and so many languages. I mean, they're the longest living culture in the world.
Yep.
You know, and my personal opinion is that, you know, they still don't get the respect that they deserve in this country, and that's a sad thing, and that's something that mainstream Australia really needs to address. I remember seeing a photo of you, Jake, on social. You know, I was following your travels vicariously from 2015 onward. I came back here to Brisbane. I was starting, you know, this path with the Open Mind Institute, starting being a young dad, and I was jealous, man. I was living vicariously through your travels. And there's a brilliant photo. You were in the red desert in this little tin bus, and all these smiling little Aboriginal boys around you. And
that was beautiful.
Really incredible. But
yeah, that was amazing.
It goes back to that unconditional positive regard. Like, people are drawn to you, Jake, because, man, you wear your heart on your sleeve, you know, and you're genuine, you're authentic, and there's something about human connection. We can tell when someone is sincere, you know. So hats off to you, man. That's absolutely
cool. That's a beautiful thing to say, and I really appreciate that. And coming from you, I feel exactly the same way. So thank you so much. They're very kind words.
My absolute.
I think that really reinforces for everyone kind of the idea of, if you go somewhere with an open mind, if you go somewhere where you have empathy for people and you're genuinely interested and you're in exchange, you know, cultural exchange of ideas, you listen to people and appreciate what you're hearing, and don't, you know, we all have our own preconceived ideas about things, but I think
we all have biases, correct?
Yeah, and I think one of the best, you know, things that you can impart to anyone wanting to kind of learn more about themselves or learn more about the world or explore the world, whether that be your own backyard in Australia or, you know, the other side of the planet, is, you know, you should always be open to having your preconceived ideas smashed open. And I think that's, you know, we're all constantly evolving as human beings. We're all growing on our own paths, whether that be our professional lives, our social lives, our own self-reflection, our own, you know, mental health, our journeys, whatever field it is in. You know, you should always be wanting to self-reflect and be ready to really have what you thought something was be kind of cracked open and taken apart and readjusted, because that's really what growth is, I think.
Mate, I couldn't have said that better myself. It's not easy for a lot of people to do, because that's wrapped up in their identity and, you know, their beliefs. But you're quite right. True growth is being able to have your beliefs challenged and being open to that process. Yeah. Jake, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing now in Melbourne.
So I work for local government. I work in community programs and I work in family, youth and children's services. I've been working with the local government I work for almost 10 years off and on. When I've been in Australia, I used to, you know, go off on some trips, come back, go off and come back. And pre-pandemic, I was also working for an NGO that operates in the same sphere, both working with mostly residents in public housing in our region, which is some wonderfully diverse community. You know, you've got a lot of South Sudanese Australian community, Eritrean Australian community, Ethiopian Australian communities, Somali Australian communities, Vietnamese Australian, mainland Chinese. You know, it's a beautiful sort of mix of people living in our public housing in the regions where I work. And I've worked mainly in community programs and education. So with the NGO, I was running a youth program for 8 to 14-year-olds. All basically 95% of the program was called community, so culturally and linguistically diverse. Most of the children coming from African Australian background, most being the first generation born in Australia, some of them still being born abroad. And then through the local government work, I've done sort of a myriad of different work in education, working with local schools, also schools that are fed by the local public housing estates. And then during COVID, for the last sort of, since mid-2020 until now, I've been part of a team that's been running community outreach to residents in public housing. So anyone who was adversely affected by COVID, especially those, COVID positive or suffering sort of financial hardship, which so many people were from all walks of life around the world during COVID, we were helping to deliver food to people in isolation for free, subsidised by state government and local governments, helping to connect people to services, working in partnership with organisations like CoHealth, DHHS, sort of Department of Health, Department of Families, Fairness and, what are they called now? Department of Families, Fairness, and something else, sorry. And so several arms of state government. And it's been magnificent. I've got to connect with a lot of families that I've known for many, many years in our local communities, on a different approach to not necessarily working with their young people anymore, but working more with the families directly to help support them at this time. And, it's been amazing to see the response from community as well, how many young leaders have emerged working in these programs and how many people from community are now working to benefit community. It's beautiful to see how many bright and sort of incredibly sort of inspiring young people there are in these communities that step up and are really like emerging leaders for the future.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible, Jake. And it's exactly what I said from the outset of this podcast, is that, you really are typical of someone who's doing your bit to make the world around you, a better place. It's very community driven. I think there's immense purpose and meaning in what you're doing. And it must be extremely rewarding, right? When you talk about these leaders and the things that you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, it is. I mean, similarly with you, Paul, I think what you're doing is magnificent. So please, I appreciate your compliments, but they're right back at you, mate. It is, as you said, it is very rewarding. And I think it kind of reinforces to me something that is very important to make sure, not make sure, but, to help. It's very important to find purpose in life in what you're doing. And I think everyone needs, most people in the world need sort of financial gain from what they're doing. We all need to support ourselves. We all need to, pay rent and, live our lives and support our families. But sometimes I think, the reward gained from something that you feel an immense sense of achievement in, and engaging with others and seeing growth in others and, supporting people and also being supported by people in the process. It's a two-way street. I think that sometimes for me that far outweighs any financial sort of gain that comes from things,
It's so true. I couldn't agree more, Jake. And I see it time and time again with a lot of my coaching clients, that they might be in a professional job where they're earning a lot of money, and because they were part of the system, they were told, you've got to go down this career path and you'll be happy. And they arrive there and the penny drops, that there's no sense of purpose in what they're doing. And we've sort of gone full circle here. It goes back to that connection, that community set piece that you spoke about before. I've just finished reading this book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've read that.
I've heard of Viktor Frankl, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah, so he was in Auschwitz himself, and he lost his wife and family. They were tortured and killed in Nazi Germany in concentration camps. And the one thing that kept him going was this sense of meaning and purpose. He would envisage himself giving lectures in Europe about his time during in these concentration camps.
Wow.
So and he was so vivid in that, and so assured that was his purpose. And it was because of that he survived that experience, and he wrote this amazing book. So I think It's a very powerful topic. You've got to have meaning and purpose in what you do. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your advice, if there's any listeners out there who are maybe in that position, who are maybe in a job that they're not entirely happy with or not sure of what their purpose might be. Jake, what advice would you give to them?
I think coming back to what we were speaking about before, some of the lessons that came from exploring the world and through work is, I think keeping an open mind in everything you're doing and never sort of turning down opportunities that might sort of arise to you. I think sometimes people don't realize how many opportunities are around them, and I think it never hurts to ask. To be inquisitive, I think, is such a key and crucial part of life, to always find out as much as you can about what is actually available to you. We've got some fantastic, we live in a country here where we're some of the luckiest people on earth. And that, from my observations of around the world, we really are in such a privileged position to live in Australia. I think, it never hurts to try. I've got a quote in my bathroom and I actually don't know who it's from. But the biggest failure in life is not to try. And that doesn't mean that it's not okay to stop something that you're doing that you might not enjoy anymore. That doesn't mean that, if something doesn't feel right, you don't need to persistently keep pushing it. But it means that, give things a go and test the waters. And, it never hurts to sort of have multiple irons, on the go. It never hurts to, have that extra arrows in your quiver to go, oh, maybe I do want to pivot into something else. I think for a lot of people, turning their hobbies into careers is a huge thing. A lot of people might have a job that they might not enjoy that much, but they might have things in their personal life that they find really fulfilling and, really satisfying to them, and exploring ways that possibly those things can become part of your life. And also I think, giving yourself time to be yourself too. I think there's a lot of expectations on us in society to perform it, to behave in a certain way, to, everyone sees that there's perhaps paths, you do primary school, your kindergarten, primary school, high school, then you got to go to uni and do this and that. That's not necessarily the way, some of the most fascinating people I've ever met are people that are living in some of the most unconventional ways around the world. And, there's always other ways to do things. You don't need to follow other people. And it sounds a little bit cliche, but I think it's very true. As long as you're happy to be you and like you to be yourself, I think, then things will arise. And really I can't enforce, like, to always remember that, a lot of the listeners, I think, are in Australia. Where we are here in this country is just, such a privileged part of the world, compared to the challenges that are faced by the vast majority of people who live on planet Earth. Australia really has. We're born into a society where we just are afforded so many opportunities from the get-go.
Correct. We take a lot of that for granted, don't we?
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
No, it does, mate. Very, very wise words.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Jake, for that. Jake, we've got this new segment, mate, on Open Minds. We call it Open Minds Hot Seat. And the way it works is I'm going to fire some questions at you.
Yeah.
You've got 60 seconds to answer as many of them as you can. And we just want the first sort of thoughts that come to mind, if that's okay.
All right.
Are you a willing participant?
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's give it a go. So I'm going to put on my timer here.
Yeah.
And 60 seconds will start from now. First question. 3 words you'd use to describe yourself.
Empathetic, extroverted, and open-minded.
Favorite food?
Oof. Gnocchi.
If there was a movie or a soundtrack to describe your life, what would it be?
Oof. Pass. I'll pass on that one. I don't have it.
Most embarrassing moment?
When I was in grade 2, I pooed in my own pants in primary school, and I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten it.
What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Be yourself. Be healthy. Take care of your mind and your body. and explore.
Fantastic, mate. And last question. I don't know if you're a Matrix fan, but would you take the blue pill or the red pill?
The blue pill goes down the rabbit hole.
I think the red pill goes down the red pill.
I'll take the red pill then.
Red pill, yeah, as would I. Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, having you on Open Minds. Your character, your humility just speaks volumes. And, mate, I've still got that bromance, I've got to tell you.
The feeling is very much mutual, Paul. Don't you worry.
So looking forward when we can catch up in the flesh. Hopefully I might be in Melbourne next month, so I'll let you know.
That'd be lovely. Come stay. There's always a bed for you at my house.
Thanks, mate. Very, very, just greatly appreciated. Before I let you go, what are your plans to travel in the near future? Where's your next destination?
Oof, there's a long list. I mean, I didn't get to mention earlier that I lived for some time in the Republic of Georgia and met some incredible, inspirational people there. So I do want to get back there and visit. Yeah. Pakistan is on the list. Bangladesh, Iraqi Kurdistan, and Yemen. There's an island called Socotra off the coast of Yemen, which looks amazing. They're all very much on the list, and getting back to see family and friends in Italy and Holland and Germany is all there too. So they're all on the cards, and study the masters. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I definitely would love to keep working with people in Melbourne and in community around the world and Australia. Yeah, good on you, mate. The world's literally your oyster, and keep doing what you're doing. Thanks, you're a magnificent human being. So all the best. I'd like to thank Jake again, and I look forward to seeing everyone in the next edition of Open Minds. My name's Paul, and always keep an open mind. Thank you. Thank you.